Episode of Old Reader, New Reader. So I'm joined here with my co-host Dan, and I'm really excited about it because I was like, "Hey, let's do Transformers," because I've never read any, and so we put up a couple for Patreon, right? For them to vote for the 2019 run, and then this.
Yeah, so the choice was between the first 30 issues of the 2019 book, because it is a slow burn start, but it's getting pretty good, or the first 4 trades of More Than Meets the Eye. And there's a specific reason why I wanted those first 4 trades.
It has nothing to do with the reason why I'm fighting tears right now. For sure.
So in general, what did you think? Because I get to be the old reader here, don't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you know, I have no knowledge of Transformers at all. Of Transformers things that I've seen, it's 3 things. I've seen a couple of the movies. I've seen that animated movie that we all went to go see, but I was jet lagged. And I watched Beast Wars when I was a kid.
Okay.
So that is my knowledge completely of Transformers. I don't know anything.
So let's go into some background here. This is the IDW started doing their version of Transformers comics in 2005, I think. And it started with Simon Furman, who was the most who was the guy who concluded the US Marvel comic run in the 80s, and who wrote Generation 2, and who was known more than anything in my recollection for just his willingness to just kill characters at the blink of an eye, which was definitely not something you saw in most comics at the time. But part of that was following his assignment, which is to sell toys, and to sell toys you got to introduce new characters all the time, and rather than have them go off screen as Bob Budiansky, the guy who wrote it before him, often did. He would kill people, but they'd just go into stasis for a long time. He would just destroy them.
Oh, this was brutal.
Oh yeah. Well, he started this universe, and it went for 12. Let's see, I can't do math. 7 years, more or less, starting from the direction that he kind of put it on, and it was okay. It had some high points, it had some low points, it had some confusing points. IDW brought in new editors during that time, and then eventually they reached a point where they wanted to pivot the books, and the way they did that was kind of turning Transformers on its head and getting rid of one of the few defining characteristics of Transformers as a genre story, whatever you want to call it, which is the war finally ended. And
6 million years. I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a long time.
And for immortal robots, basically. And this series that we read for this is More Than Meets the Eye by James Roberts and primarily Alex Milne on art. This starts up right after the Transformers war finally ends, with the Autobots winning. And the issue is, in the setup, is that basically okay, the war's over. What do we do now? And it splits at this point editorially into 2 different books. One book is the Transformers staying on Cybertron and trying to integrate the Decepticons and the Autobots and unaffiliated robots that are all coming back to Cybertron at the same time, and how that goes. And then there's this book, More Than Meets the Eye, which is about Rodimus and his crew of a lot of different types of characters who are going on a quest to find these ancient Cybertronians and cyber utopia to basically get a chance to start over.
So this is like a ragtag group, right?
Yes. And
because I brought up to a friend and they were like, how do you know? I was like, I mentioned Rung. And he's like, how do you know Rung? I was like, this is like a group of like kind of a weird amalgamation of almost like some secondhand characters, right?
Very much so. And a lot of these characters now some of them have been main characters both in the IDW stories that preceded this and Transformers in general for a long time. But there are a lot of lesser used characters in this, and characters who appeared for like the first time in a handful of stories leading up to this split. Basically, James Roberts, the guy who's behind this series, was able to kind of inject a few of them just to get them into the universe, into some of the handful of stories leading up to this. So like Rodimus and Ratchet and a handful of the others were big characters prior to this, but Rung and Swerve and Chrome Dome and Rewind and a lot of those folks had barely been in the universe before this book really gave them the forefront. And the thing about this book too is that I think the first issue or whenever it was says that there are like 208 Cybertronians on this ship, and it really focuses on about 10 of them.
Yeah, I was a little confused, I guess.
Yeah, and as I'm going back and rereading these, it's like, oh right, Hound's on the ship. Oh right, Blaster's on the ship. And it's like you forget about the characters that aren't part of Team Rodimus, going on the excursions like it's a cruise ship. But for me, this, because I followed the Transformers comics as they were coming out, just more out of a sense of duty as opposed to anything else.
Yeah.
They were okay. But this is when it was like, holy crap. This is a take on Transformers that is so different from everything else we've seen, where it's not just about telling clever war stories. It's just about telling clever stories, but building on, in a lot of cases, using a lot of characters who hadn't been there before to fill in certain roles, but also building on what had come before with a lot of these characters. And it's so gratifying to me as a Transformers fan to see this kind of take on it. And even in these first 4 trades, I'm sure you saw that one of the most amazing things to me about this is the world building that James Roberts puts into it, with the just little references peppered out that don't seem to mean anything at the time, that pay off 10, 20 issues later. And it's oh, wow.
Well, and even for someone, because I spent a lot of this, this took me a lot longer than I thought it would, which is not a bad thing.
It took me a lot longer.
I don't expect it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, 4 trades, whatever. And I get into oh, this is taking me an hour to read one. And that does not happen for me.
They're wordy.
They're wordy, but it's not a bad thing. And a lot of the knowledge is over my head because I have nothing to cling to. Yeah. And I have to work that memory to figure out, okay, who is who, and there's a lot of characters at play here. But even with that, I can tell that throughout that the storytelling, the dialogue, everything is really, really good. And so even if there are points I'm like, I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
The whole time I was like, if I knew better, I would really get it. But I still really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ride.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I was kind of, as I was rereading it for this, I was trying to look at what are the story points in here that you would have to know kind of the general treatment of these characters to really get. And the one that struck me the most, I think, was in the 3rd grade, the whole heist storyline that they did with Orion Pax and everything.
Yeah.
And is the payoff that the senator that Pax has been working with the whole time is Shockwave. And I'm imagining you reading that and be like,
I was like, I should probably know.
Yeah, like,
but
okay. That final page where they've got, the purple head and it's like, I imagine that payoff didn't hit.
No.
And there are a handful of others. But so much of what's in these books, like the Decepticon Justice Division and like Rung as a concept, as a character, and the way he's threaded throughout all these stories, the treatment of Rodimus as someone driven by his own fear of his own failure as much as just running on pure bravado and gusto, like the living embodiment of just more intensity. So much of that is new to this series, that I thought it would be. I thought it'd have its own payoff, and
that's good to know too, because like I think one benefit that you have that I don't is that I don't know what other Transformers comics were like before this or after this.
Yeah.
So when I go into something like this, I'm like, okay, I assume this is normal, and I'm missing out on things.
Well, right. And this is the book that for anyone who has expressed any interest in Transformers comics or who I've convinced to read Transformers comics, it's funny. This is the book I tend to go to. Just because it is so good and doesn't, for the most part, require you to know what's going on. Like, especially the way the trades are mapped out, where it starts with that Death of Optimus Prime one shot, which is a little bit heavy, and assumes some knowledge, but it at least sets the.
Well, at least I've known he's died before. So.
Right.
That was the one thing I was clinging to. I was like, okay. And then when they called him a different name, I didn't quite understand until somebody explained it to me in the book.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated that one guy was like, oh, wait, that's him? Oh, you're kidding me. That's crazy.
Well, and I reading back over that, I appreciated the way they did that, even though it's still very, it requires you to either know what's going on or to just be willing to take a lot on faith.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the only knowledge you have to have of Transformers going into this, I think, to start with this is just there's good Transformers and bad Transformers, and they've been at war for a long time.
Yeah. Because
this establishes that the war's over, and now we've got to figure out what to do.
Yeah, it reminded me of I feel like if I had to compare this to something else, I would compare it to Star Trek. Because you're just on a ship, and there's a lot of there's an overarching story, absolutely, but there's also a lot of really well segmented individual stories throughout here, which I think helps keep that in mind, because you have all these different different Transformers on the ship that are very different of different duties.
Yeah,
having a psychiatrist and going through that and what that looks like is very interesting.
Right.
And I learned so much about not asking Transformers about what their alt mode is. And things like that, or religious things where they take out your Transformer cog. I didn't even know there's a Transformers cog.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works.
Well, and again, so much of that, and if you continued to read these trades, there are 10 trades of More Than Meets the Eye, and then I think 3 or 4 or 5 of its follow-up series, Lost Light, that tell this whole story of this crew. One of the things that I mentioned very early on is the world building that pays off, and that just continues to. It's like compound interest, and how it just continues to build on the references that came before, that were planted before, of somebody says a throwaway line about somebody's hobby, and then that ends up becoming of central importance later on, or Swerve trying to get into Brainstorm's briefcase and activating his meta bomb. And it's like in the issue it appears in, it's like a 2-panel joke. And then later on in the series, all of a sudden it's like the central plot device just of the implications of it.
Well, I appreciate the jokes and like the everyone giving each other a hard time. And I liked at the end of each like volume, at least I was reading it online, I had the pictures and they had like their name, but then like a funny little bit about it. I was like, I really appreciate how much that like helps me connect with each character a lot more.
Yeah, they've done that really well. That was something that I first saw when I first started picking up comics again in the aughts. Marvel was doing that, and it was like, okay, that's all right. But like when it's done kind of tongue in cheek, it's actually a little more effective, I think.
Yeah, it was cute
because it's like, here's just a thing that can help you differentiate this blue guy from this blue guy.
It was very helpful for me personally, because I definitely kept checking, because I would show it to you, but I kept like taking photos of those pages so I could go back and study. So I'm like, okay,
nice.
Remember, this is who. Cyclonus is purple, used to be bad guy. Yes. Like Ultra Magnus. Well, I always remember who Ultra Magnus is because I liked him, but it took a bit. At least Red Alert was red, and Rung had eyebrows, so that helped.
Yeah. And we touched on something a minute ago, and it's kind of been percolating in the back of my mind. But I think part of the reason I love this so much is it models itself. It was the Star Trek thing that you said, and it models itself kind of on that. The best type of those stories where it's not like modern TV where it's, or modern, let's say drama, comedy, whatever you want to call that. But take something like, and in the Star Trek universe, I'm comparing, say, the things people love about Deep Space Nine, right? That Deep Space Nine never forgot that it was a episodic television series, and every episode, or maybe 2 or 3-parter, had its own self-contained story that stood apart from all the other self-contained stories. But along the line, you were seeing plot threads being developed that
that's
eventually.
Why it's my favorite.
Right, and it was done much better in that than it was in any other Star Trek series that I'm aware of. And I'm not a huge Star Trek person, but I can find my way around the universe. Compare that to something like Discovery or Picard, where it's just like, here's what happened to these people last week. Here's what's happening to them this week. That story's just going to continue next week. And this whole season is one long chain of events of what's happening to these people, as opposed to individual little adventures.
Yeah, like watching like a Monster of the Week sort of thing.
Yeah, and this, again, and these are things I'm noticing on rereading it for the show, but this really struck me as kind of very similar to that, in that it's like, here are 2 issues that tell a single story, a standalone story. But the whole time there is so much character development and larger story development going on behind the scenes. There are no resets. It's not that Data is going to not remember he has an emotion chip in the next episode, or whatever. That's a bad example, but that struck me here too. And again, I'm trying, even though I just reread it all, the whole series kind of stays fresh in my mind. And there are episodes later on that play on that sitcom episodic motif explicitly. And it's just, again, it all pays off on stuff that's developed early on in the series.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to have to know now.
Well,
what happens to everyone.
You could just
so mad about it.
I know you don't have anything going on. You read, hundreds and hundreds of pages of Transformers comics, but it's worth the time.
Well, I mean, I at least have to hang out till they find the Knights of Cybertron.
Yeah.
All they found was that big planet or whatever. Okay, this is one of those things where like this is gonna be my turn to sound really dumb because all I can do is describe things like that, like because I don't know.
Oh, when they found the remains of Diatlus's guys, the
yeah, and it was real sad that it couldn't go home.
Yeah.
Jaden, I even cried about it. And Hayden, the reason why I cried about it is the reason why you would like it. I gotta tell you, I'm crushed.
Well, and that's, it's why, like, again, that's why I chose to end where we ended it, is because it's the lowest point in the series. It's definitely the Empire Strikes Back of
oh yeah
the series. But I was just curious, coming at this new and not knowing any of these characters, whether it would resonate with you as much as it resonated with me the first time I read it. Because a lot of the focus on this series is, to be very reductionist about it, is, hey, Transformers are gay now.
Well, and honestly, like, I didn't even notice.
Right.
And so, like, I didn't notice until I was like 3 volumes in, and I did, like, while I was sitting outside, I was taking a break, I was looking through Wikipedia, and they were like, this was the first truly gay romantic couple. I was like, wait, what?
Right.
Didn't even occur to me.
Right, exactly. And I was curious whether that would, because again, going back and rereading it, I think Roberts does an excellent job of just introducing, in particular, Chrome Dome and Rewind as a couple, and you never even like it. It's one of those things because they're always together, and
yeah,
it's never a big deal.
I never thought about it.
And it's one of those things that if you aren't being perceptive as you're reading, it really sneaks up on you, and especially there at the end of volume 4, where I think the term conjunx indura doesn't even come up until like the second to last issue or something, where it gets kind of explicit that no, these guys aren't just really good friends, they are a couple. They are in love. This is, and it's just, it both made me happy and sad at the time to see Transformers comics getting so much attention for that. Happy just to see Transformers comics getting attention from the wider comics press. And, the thing is, these books have always, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but as I understand it, these books have always sold well. Like, they're not, obviously no comic these days is X-Men #1 numbers, right?
Oh, yeah.
But, like, the first, like, Dreamwave Transformers comics in the aughts sold ridiculous numbers. And the Transformers books in general have been, like, as far as I understand it, and again, I could be wrong, but they've been IDW's best-selling property. And they sell comparative numbers to, Marvel and DC books. So it's not like they didn't have a big chunk of the market already. Mm-hmm. But to see them getting attention in the serious mainstream comic press, for stories about toy robots.
Yeah,
I was thrilled at that. But on the other hand, it was very, that coverage was also a little bit reductive of like, oh, look, they've got gay couples in Transformers. And it's like, okay, yeah, they've got couples in Transformers. I mean, that in and of itself is kind of a unique idea.
Yeah.
Or not a unique idea, but it's being explored here in a way that it never has before.
I was trying to like, because I was talking to some friends right before I came on here about it, and I was trying to, because like Transformers technically don't have like a gender, right? There are some like feminine ones.
Well, see, and that was one of the biggest kind of missteps that they did.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go deep cut knowledge on you here.
Go for it.
RC, for a long time, who was in the animated movie that you saw, the pink robot from that movie.
Yeah.
She was introduced into the IDW universe initially as like a freak experiment. I mean, in a like really weird and offensive kind of way, as kind of, and I haven't read that particular story in a while, but basically, like she was a male transformer who was converted into a female transformer by mad scientist. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very awkwardly done. It wasn't particularly well thought out from that perspective, and they've retconned a lot of that back to where it was at least a little more consensual and something she wanted. But other than that, there wasn't much consideration given to gender of these transforming robots, because in general they're robots, right?
Yeah.
But as you read more again of this run in particular, and then also to the equivalent run in More Than Meets the Eye, the other ongoing book at this point, both books start to address this head on. One, just to say, well, okay, no, there are actually male and female identifying transformers, but later on in this run, it does go into kind of just a choice of the types of traits that appear among organic races that they most identify with,
and that makes sense. Like when I looked at it,
right,
I was like, oh, this to me, I'm like, oh, it's like a Steven Universe, but not. Like, because the gems, they don't have a gender, but if you look at them, you're like, okay, feminine.
Exactly.
And you look at these robots, like male.
Yeah.
But like non-gendered.
Right. They're
essentially fine with me.
Gendered, but at the same time, this particular franchise, because of its origin as the boys' toys market, there is just the assumption that all of the robots are boy robots, and that's another part of this, and I've got to credit all of IDW's editorial staff at this point, where after that initial misstep, they worked really hard to organically introduce the concept of gender and gender fluidity to some extent into these comics. You don't see a huge amount of that actually, I don't think you see really any of that in this run. But
at least not in these first four.
Right. In these first four trades. But as you continue in on this series and different characters get introduced in different ways, more female identifying transformers just get integrated in. And and then it's interesting. And again, this is where I was kind of cringing at the reductiveness of some of that initial press of like, oh, look, they've got gay robots.
Well, they also killed one.
Right. Well,
which is like such a bad stereotype. Anyways, continue.
But that was story-wise to make it
I will take it. It was beautiful. Sorry, real quick. Jordan said, why are alien robots from the galaxy forming sexual relationships whatsoever? That seems really redundant. I wouldn't say it's
they're not.
You would know better. I don't think that's
it's relationships. And and it's going into the difference between friendships and close friendships and bonds of love.
Yeah.
Tie you specifically to one other person, as opposed to just your best friends.
Yeah, it's just more than that. It's different than familial love.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and there isn't a sexual per se element to any of it. It's just, who do you want to be with?
Yeah.
And, and again, it's so slowly introduced in here. And so it just
I had no idea.
Right. It's and if going back and reading back, in the first panels they're appearing together, and it's and again, it just never becomes an issue that they're a couple until that last storyline where it's like, oh, I get it now.
So there's so much to talk about in this whole book, but since we're already talking about it, we should talk about this.
Are you wanting to skip straight to the end of the payoff?
Well, okay. Well,
yeah,
I'm worried that we'll miss
it.
And then I want to talk about other stories.
Yeah.
I chose the wrong panel. I thought I saved the right one. So his goodbye message was beautiful.
That was the right one.
Like, okay, I didn't think, because it didn't look like it was shaded right. So I thought I saved the right one.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. But I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, so
people at home who haven't seen it, like, there's a point at the end, spoilers, we do spoilers on the show, where Rewind dies. He has to he sacrifices himself to go off with, I can't believe I even know any of these words, this Decepticon overlord.
Yeah. And
he separates himself from the ship and from Chrome Dome to like get himself separated from the ship. And they can't do anything else but kill him, because who knows what Overlord's going to do.
Torture him to death.
Yeah.
And make it last as long as he can, because one of the things that's been established, and I thought he did a pretty decent job in this of referring to it, but Overlord is like hooch crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that the concept of him being trapped with Overlord was so repellent that Chrome Dome is like, get out of the way, I need to blow that thing
and up. Quickly, which was I mean, necessary.
No second thoughts. No, let's try to save
him.
No, it's just there's no other choice here.
And then the message was beautiful. It was beautifully illustrated. I've never seen anything like that. I thought it was wonderful, because we have Rewind, who's essentially his whole purpose, as far as when he was created, was to basically be just a holder of data and information and recordings. His alt form's like a USB, basically. And so he's always been recording everybody. And then he sends this message to the team, and primarily Chrome Dome, but it's using just bits and pieces of words of recordings of other people, of other Transformers. And so that's how he delivers his final message, because he doesn't have time to record one himself. So it's just it's cropped up. Everyone's saying a different word or phrase. Oh my God. I cried so hard. Beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And it's again, it's, talking about the buildup of one of the constant refrains is that people get annoyed that Rewind is always recording everything.
Yeah.
And that, and he's just constantly shown that's what he does. He records everything. He archives everything. He's got archives of everything. He's showing movies all the time. He's just, that's what he does. And the payoff of that is this message, that the groundwork was laid for. And I might be wrong on this, but I am almost positive that every single one of those messages is actually a scene that appeared in the Transformers comics of that point. Not necessarily in this comic, but what's chosen here.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of this is from characters that aren't in this series. But
because I don't recognize everyone.
Yeah, the parts in the middle with Nova Prime and some of these others are absolutely the Springer Keep Going Without Me there at the bottom. A lot of these are panels from this book.
Yeah,
some of them are redrawn panels from other books, but again, it's still all a payoff of what has come up to this point.
It's so cool.
It is so cool.
It's very Spock and Kirk right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's so good.
It's so good. It's so good.
Okay, good. I need to get out of the way. Now we can talk about other things. But brilliant. 10 out of 10 just for that. Like, everyone should just read that bit. It's so well done. I'm upset at how well done it is.
Yeah.
And I'm upset the rewind's dead forever.
And he's dead forever.
So mad. Sorry, you should lead the conversation. We should talk about other characters and stuff.
Oh, no,
other bits.
I will say one of the reasons I love this book in general is its take on Rodimus. You know, a lot of the Transformers fandom has very mixed feelings about Hot Rod and Rodimus and Rodimus Prime. And this version—
Wait, is that what his actual name is? So that's Hot Rod?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I've heard— I feel so dumb. I've heard that name and someone said Hot Rod. I was like, oh, is Hot Rod here?
Yeah.
That's the Transformers name I know.
So in this book, he's called Rodimus.
Because he's serious now.
Well, really, that's it, you know, the story of this character up to this point is, you know, young, brash, learning to be a leader, that sort of thing. But this take on him as kind of— this take on Rodimus so consciously inverts the take on Rodimus Prime that most Transformers fans up to this point were familiar with, which is the characterization from Series 3 of the original cartoon series, where he's always like, oh, I'm not a good leader. I'm not as good as Optimus Prime. I'm always second guessing my decisions. And, you know, ho hum. I just wish I could go back to my, you know, happy-go-lucky days as Hot Rod. And, you know, there's a lot more stories that could be told with that version of the character. And, you know, I've gone back and rewatched them, and it's like I weirdly identify with that character now as I'm getting older. It's like, you know, Rodimus Prime is the personification of imposter syndrome in a lot of ways. And the interesting thing about this is this characterization is such a 180 from that characterization, where he's like, you know, I believe in myself far beyond anything I'm actually capable of doing. And you know, I think I'm so much smarter than I am. But it's in a lot of ways, it's really just the opposite side of that same kind of like personification of imposter syndrome, where
he's— makes sense, right? Because he's been on this planet without Optimus, right? Yeah. So like he's been kind of like thrust into— why do I know any of this now? This is so weird. He's been thrust in this like leadership position right on the planet because Optimus hasn't been there. Right. And they kind of had to figure this out on their own. This whole like war zone, everybody's coming back. It makes sense to me that he's like, I kind of had to figure it out while you were gone. And then once Optimus is like, hey, you guys can have it. And he's like, oh, this is my time. I'm Rodimus Prime now, and I'm taking a ship out of here because this place sucks anyways.
But I just, you know, I love the way, and again, this is a long character arc over the whole series of him coming to grips with leadership and the fact that other people are better at things than he is. And like his story not at the end of what I had you read, but at the end of the whole thing ends on a very melancholy note. Mm-hmm. And it's fully appropriate for the way the character is developed. But, you know, you see a lot of that beginning here and paying off with, again, in Rewind's funeral, with the whole, they did it, they saved us, they did what I couldn't do.
Yeah.
So much, and again, that's why I had you read these first 4 trades, because so much of these stories pay off with that last, like, out of nowhere terrible apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
You know, arc of Overlord getting loose and just mass murdering his way through the ship.
Hate him. Well, I mean, and it's interesting to see him as this type now, knowing who he was before, because I didn't know. But like, this crew is probably not the typical crew, because they got some problems.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which I think makes him very endearing. Like, I really love Fortress Maximus. I'm a big Fortress Maximus fan now, especially after the whole bit where, okay, and I didn't understand how this bit worked, but there was that there was an issue where they were finding bugs.
Yeah.
Or whatever, and for some, okay, and you'll have to explain. I don't understand. But
here's my question.
Had him smile. Was that Ultra Magnus in that one?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Oh, see, they look the same to me.
They do kind of look the same.
Okay, never mind. Anyways, I still like Fortress Maximus though, for his other stuff that I actually know that he's in. But I thought that was him in that one. Anyways, I really liked when Ultra Magnus did that bit where he smiled and the bugs went away. But I don't know why. And I don't know why I made fun of him. But I thought it was really funny, but I didn't understand why it was happening.
Right.
I just knew that he smiled and then everybody made fun of him and he was very upset.
Well, and the lead up to that is just this is the serious Ultra Magnus who never smiles and never cuts loose. And again, tracing his plot line through all of this ends on a much more uplifting note than Rodimus's, where this series is definitely focused on self-actualization for the characters and how they learn and grow and how these and it's focused so much more on the relationships between the characters that are just told through the hijinks they get into.
Yeah.
Than any other Transformers book before this, again, which was all like conflict driven. And again, it's such a I just get like to the point where I have a hard time articulating how much I love this book.
There's just such good bits.
Fandom for that, but
like also when they had the whole bit about Red Alert and talking about his past and like going through that, I thought that was wonderfully written.
Oh yeah,
where they were like, he's like, well, how do I explain my job? I would say Red Alert, and he described like that whole background with him about like it took this many sessions for him to tell me his name, this many sessions for him to tell me his actual name.
Right.
This many is he's gonna stop recording, and this many took he actually stopped, and like dealing with his paranoia and all that stuff. Like, I feel like I was not expecting. This is a 4-trade. Well, it's longer, but we only read 4 trades, but it keeps going.
So this was 16 issues plus a special and an annual in the first 4 trades of More Than Meets the Eye.
And they're beefy.
Yeah. They are no longer than your average comic book, but there is a lot of words on each page.
Yeah, and I'm a fast reader, and it was a bit. But
and
good.
It's definitely it is dense both in like there is stuff in the art that is not like necessarily like shouted out or that is emphasized in a way that it's like, hey, pay attention to this. There is an expectation that I think with this book that you are looking at it closely as you read and not just reading the bubbles. So it's an investment. It's a time investment, but it's definitely worth it. It's a huge payoff.
Yeah.
And
we just started talking about Red Alert. So talk about Pharma versus Ratchet. That was a little hard for me to follow. I followed the stuff with Red Alert very well. Yeah. The stuff between Pharma and Ratchet was a little hard for me to completely follow everything.
Well, so many of these stories, and I find it so cool that this book, again, in a lot of ways, it's not that these are the first time that some of these issues have been addressed in comic book or in Transformers, stories, but this book in so many ways just explores, okay, well, what does it really mean that these characters are literally millions of years old. That's
all the
going to
PTSD and like
right, and that's
that
going
they obviously have
that the whole long history of Red Alert, that like there's not any huge they've got so much time that it's like in our 303rd session he told me his real name, and things like that. But the Pharma Ratchet story, as I was reading it, I was kind of wondering, okay, I wonder if this will hit with someone who isn't familiar with these characters, because most of those characters have been seen before in other Transformers media and stuff when it gets into the medics with First Aid and Pharma. I think Ambulon is an original character for this.
okay.
But not in a way that really matters. That story, more so than most of the rest in the book, I thought did a great job of the like everything but the main thing in it, which was trying to like show the long relationship between Ratchet and Pharma and the betrayal involved, which kind of came out of left field here. And Pharma, I don't think, was a particularly developed character in the IDW books at this point.
I think that might be why. I mean, I like the overall plot that was happening around it.
Yeah, but that is like it didn't hit like a payoff. It was really and the whole like how Ratchet got his hands back title splash at the end. It in a lot of ways it did kind of feel like, okay, this was one long setup for a joke.
Yeah.
And but that was set up in the very first issue where he's complaining about his hands. Oh no, that's not yet.
Oh, later. Whoops.
Yeah, the Ambulon died 30 minutes ago. That's that happens after what we read today.
But I did like hearing about the virus and stuff, and I liked hearing about the like I had to start killing bots for the Transformer cogs because that was the only way I could protect everybody.
Right. And
this was way darker than I expected. Because I was like, okay.
The whole Decepticon Justice Division concept, that's the first time you're introduced to it, like, at all. So even the first time I'm reading this is like, what the hell are they talking about? And then when the next trade, in the next series of issues spends like, I think 3 or 4 issues just on those characters, on the Scavengers and the DJD. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is paying off the references before that, like, they didn't really explain. And it's in a lot of ways, for me, that's when I started trusting the storytelling here. Like, okay, stuff that I don't understand now, I just have to remember it and it'll pay off later.
Yeah.
And again, that's a constant theme through this book.
And I think for that reason, I might go back and reread it at some point too, to better catch everything.
Yeah. And again, it does pay off. There's stuff that I saw that I realized, connects to later stuff as I was reading through, because it's been a while since I've read it like this. The last time I reread all of these was in the context of the Transformers IDW hardbacks that are, that by the time they're including this are just kind of integrating this with the other ongoing series and kind of in kind of like chunks. And so it's not, go ahead.
How would you say this compares to like the other ongoing series that was kind of at the same time?
I preferred this one.
Okay.
I don't know if that's fair. I think the other series, frankly, had more work to do and concerned itself. Let's see how to say this.
You said the planet, right?
John
the Optimus dipped.
What's that?
You said that's just it. That one focuses on like what was going on back home, right?
What was going on in Cybertron? Yeah, and but I do think that book was tasked with a lot more of the toy selling duties.
Oh, okay.
By Hasbro, in the sense that, they at the time these books were coming out, they were doing books, or they were doing toys based on some of the looks of the Lost Light characters.
Okay.
But at least in these 4 arcs, some of it hits this book later on. It didn't ever feel like, okay, why are we focusing on this story or on this character rather than something else that's going on? And the obvious answer is, okay, well, no, it's because these are the toys in stores right now. Whereas the other book definitely did feel like it was pulled more by, okay, well, now we need to have the combiners, and now we need to have this, and now we need to have that, and the need to, as much as possible, to build up to those stories organically. So stuff kept getting introduced that seemed to like derail the plots.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the comments that you pulled up was, it was a book a lot more about political intrigue, and it was the more serious book.
Okay.
It was definitely less fun. It was great storytelling, but harder to read in some ways.
Okay.
Just because it was taking itself very seriously. And
so would you say, like, so I enjoyed this. Would it be worth just continuing this run?
The reason I would tell you, so anybody who asks me, who says I'm interested in Transformers books, I'm going to start them with the hardback IDW Phase 2 Volume 1.
Okay.
That's all the post-war stories.
Okay, which I think sounds good for me, because
and it starts with this, and then also the Robots in Disguise book.
Okay.
Which was the ongoing on Cybertron stuff, and kind of just takes them in parallel as they go.
Okay.
And the 2 stories dovetail at, about, I want to say, let's see, pull up my trades here.
But Optimus like dipped, right? So is he in the other book, or is he just like?
Yeah, he drops out and then comes back.
I was really happy for him.
No,
because I really like that whole monologue at the beginning.
But yeah, there's one more trade in More Than Meets the Eye, and then there's basically an intersection with Robots in Disguise and what's going on in that book, and then More Than Meets the Eye comes back on a significantly different tangent.
Okay.
Still building on the same stories that have been developed, but with, well, I mean, again, spoilers. There's basically Megatron's an Autobot now, and he's co-captain with Rodimus.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And those stories are incredible too. I'm definitely a fanboy of this book, much more so. And people can criticize it for different storytelling issues and whatnot, and have fun.
I like it.
I love it.
But I tend to like the stories that aren't. I don't know. I like stories like this. I like it when they're not about like the main, big huge plot. Like, I loved Outsiders, which is like one of my favorite DC runs.
Yeah.
Because they're fun, but very personal. Like,
it's
storytelling
that is very personal. I like that take on it, but it's one of those, like, the storytelling is much of the time lighter, but not at the expense of the story. Like, just because they're taking a lighter tone to the story they're telling doesn't mean that the storytelling effort itself is being cut.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why the ending hit as well as it did, is because we had the light moments.
Right.
Because we had the fun and the goofing around. So when somebody actually does die or is gravely injured or betrays you or whatever, it is so much harder to go through than it would be if it was serious the whole time, because you're like, oh, well, kind of expected it.
Right. I mean, So and to compare it to the other book, in the other book there is a character called Meadowhawk that they try to build up as kind of the leader of the unaffiliated Transformers. And maybe going back and rereading it, I'd feel differently. I don't know, but at some point he gets killed, and it becomes like a fulcrum for events going forward. But at that point,
can you call it a fulcrum when there is already a fulcrum?
Well, that's probably why that word popped in.
I know what these things are.
But like there, it was just like, okay, well, that's the next beat for the story. Whereas here, it's like, holy shit, this character that I love just got like killed in a horrible way.
Yeah, right after they were like, here's a sad backstory. Which, if I was watching a TV show, I'd be like, oh, so he's going to die next. But in this comic, I was like, oh, it's just time for a nice story.
Right, because we had done that 2 or 3 times before. Of like, here's this backstory. Here's this.
We had great backstories and like, oh man, names. Oh, the Transformer who has been like asleep for 6 million years.
Oh yeah,
like knowing about Tailgate and so like I've enjoyed learning about all of these. So when this came up, I was like, oh, okay, you just want to like tell me what's up. It's like, no, actually. And his backstory was so sad.
I know. I mean, it's so the mixing of tragedy and comedy and good storytelling in this book. This is it's unfair to say, and I haven't read every comic out there, but like, this is my favorite comic ever.
Oh.
And it is some of the best storytelling ever.
I'm so glad to talk about it with you.
Well, I'm so glad that you wanted to do it. Because
I did immediately look up Rewind toys the second I stopped reading. I was like, no, you can't do this.
Unfortunately, there's this guy from, I think he's from Combiner Wars from a few years ago, and he's definitely based on the IDW interpretation, including the little. I don't think you can see it. He's got the little camera on the side of his head.
I can't think about it. I'll cry.
Yeah, but
luckily people sell pins, so I'll just.
Well, so you gotta come to TFCon with me and Omar, and
I have to now.
Yeah,
but only so I can be really obnoxious about how much I like this one character. I'll just like, I only read this run of Transformers, and I'm dedicated.
One of my favorite things, and I realize we're coming at time, but
it's fine.
At BotCon in Lexington, whenever it was, which was 15, 16, whenever it was, there was a woman who cosplayed Whirl's Hollow avatar with the Uzis and the overalls and the pigtails. And like, I'm sitting there at the Transformers, and I was trying to figure out like, what is I was like, that's the greatest thing in the world. And it's just that all these concepts that are, and again, the Hollow avatar concept pays off later.
Oh, really?
A whole different way. Yeah. I mean, so much of what's going on is just, it's not setups for setup's sake, but it's just building on development that happens in these early issues. And it pays off so well. And, with anything like this, I'm so tempted to compare it to episodic TV where, something like Lost or whatnot, where at the beginning it feels like everything is building to something, but then it's like, oh, okay, well, at some point they just realized they didn't know where they were going. And you could definitely accuse this series as it goes on of losing the thread a little bit, but almost everything that is placed early on pays off or gets tied up in the end. And it all pays off, even though these series both ended up, the ones at this point both ended up ending sooner than was originally planned.
Yeah.
because IDW decided, no, let's just kill that universe and start a new universe. But
is Rewind back there? Back in that.
I can't,
my little boy.
I can't think if Rewind appears there or not.
They wouldn't do that because they hate me.
But yeah, you should definitely keep reading these because
I think I'd like to.
We had to come back and do another episode of this with the rest of this run, the remaining 6.
Oh, that's okay. That's doable. Now I know how much time I have to allocate, right. So it'll be better because if you say 4 volumes, I'm like,
well, no,
an hour and a half.
Because as I was trying to figure out, like, where should we, where'd be a good point to do this, and I'm kind of skimming through. It's like, okay, I know the story beat I wanted to end on, and I was like,
it was the perfect choice.
That's a lot, but it's only 16 issues. The last time I was on the show, we read 12 issues of Kanan, and that went pretty quick.
But there's so much in here, though.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you did because, like, one, I'm the kind of person who's always about, like, if it ends really well, that's going to change my entire view of the whole thing. Because I was struggling at the beginning, but it's just a completely different landscape. Right. But even now, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, okay, I have absorbed things. I recognize who is who mostly, and figure out what's going on. And it's great. And I do want to reread it because now I'm like, okay, I want to take my time.
Yeah.
For one. And now I'm going to realize better what is happening.
and then I also have to say, I don't want to harp too much on the difference between this book and, the other ongoing title at this point. But the other reason why this book has such a hold on my memory too is the art. Alex Milne's Transformers are so expressive without being cartoonish. Mm-hmm. And Transformers are hard to draw, right?
Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, but like I was very surprised because it didn't even.
But this art is so clean, and there's so much going on in each panel. But it never, for the most part, the panels themselves, you never really get confused with what's going on, and who the different characters are because the kind of trademark of the series is the unique looks for each character.
Yeah, I'd say. I didn't do a good job. That's because I just didn't know anybody.
Well,
but once I did, it was better. I could tell who was who. But that's just because if you have a blue head, I assume you're all the same person, which is a problem.
But the art in this book just, it's so good, and I love it so much. And we
can talk about Transformers now.
Yeah, as I just want to do with everybody, but so few people in my life want to just talk about Transformers all the time. Maddie, I don't understand.
Well, I get it now with this because when we saw the movie, I was like, this is not for me. But I like this.
Yeah,
this is good. It's dark, ripping organs out of people. I say organs, you know what I mean?
Well, they are.
People die. There's a plague we have to worry about. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so this is the time of show where we're supposed to do our rating, and then we can chill with the chat or continue talking about the book or whatever. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 only because I didn't understand everything. I could see it becoming a 10. I think it's a 10 out of 10 book. I can recognize it's a 10 out of 10 book. Until I fully grasp everything, I can't give it that. But I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
Well, I'm going to give it 10 Rodimus stars out of 10. And you haven't even seen the Rodimus star yet.
I know who that is.
Yeah, this is my favorite book, period.
I'm so glad.
All time.
You shared it with me.
So yeah, I'm so glad you won.
And I cried a lot in front of you before the show.
Well, let's do some chat.
Well, Jaden gave it 10 out of 10. Amazing storytelling and art. Is Maddie a Transformers fan now? I like it enough to read more of it and to look for merchandise. So I'd say it works. Next up is Ninja Turtles. I've never read Ninja Turtles, so
I started reading Ninja Turtles, and I haven't really taken the plunge. I've read the first few issues, and I could see that it was going to get good, but it didn't grab me, and then I got distracted by something else. I just need to come back to it.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to, we can put it on we can do a show on it. We'll bring Steven in again, because Steven's read those, the guy who did the game with us. Hayden, I appreciate, when I saw Fulcrum, I only think about Star Wars. So
yeah, Fulcrum
that's my reference. Maddie, Dan, Omar, all geeking out over Transformers. Let's hope it doesn't go too far. I don't need another thing to collect, okay? I don't.
Again, well, you're lucky because there's not a lot of merch associated with this.
Good. I will buy some sort of.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
I am gonna buy probably some goofy pin, because Transformers is popular with like people my age and younger now.
Yeah.
Like all of our TikTok people cosplay. Like it just all of a sudden it was like in the vernacular. I was like, when did you guys, where did you start? I just was very surprised. I didn't expect that on my TikTok feed.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot more like interesting like craft stuff with Transformers and whatnot than you would expect. And different takes on the characters, and so many of those also keep coming back to this particular run too, because everybody loves it. Even people who don't love it, they secretly love it.
10 out of 10 based purely on this chat, since I've not read it.
I agree with that.
Listen, Hayden, all I can tell you is let me upload this picture fan art. I mean, you're gonna love it.
It's so good.
Trust me. Maddie would like the Transformers Prime show. It's a good balance of Dragon Light. It's like on Amazon Prime. Do you mean?
No, it's Transform.
Prime, because obviously.
But I think it is on Netflix. It is 3 seasons. It's similar to Beast Wars.
Okay.
In storytelling, it's a small group of characters on both sides, and it is episodic, but still, still overall stories being told.
Question for you, Dan, from James. How do you feel about the new Transformers Rise of the Beast movie? It's supposed to be a live action adaptation of Beast Wars.
We'll see when it comes out. I mean, I am definitely on record as not being a huge fan of the live action movies, but I enjoyed Bumblebee. It was kind of fun.
That's the one I hear is good. I haven't watched it yet.
I mean, it's still not my Transformers, but I don't resent it for its existence.
Yeah. I feel that way about a lot of media.
So, and the thing that I finally came to terms with was, even though, I really disliked the Transformers films, the first 5 of them or whatever, it's definitely a rising tide that raises all boats, because there's so much Transformers stuff from that the stuff I like also gets face time. Like these comics would not exist without those movies. And so, anything that brings Beast Wars back to the popular consciousness, I'm going to be a fan of, even if I don't like the particular implementation.
I feel that way about so many things.
I'm not going to be a huge fan of the Netflix series that's coming out in a few months that's going to have Beast Wars characters in it. But I'm still thrilled to get new Beast Wars toys. So,
Yeah, I just remember watching it when I was a kid, but I think that's also like I watched stuff like that, like Zoids, which is felt very similar as far as like animal robots.
Right.
But to be honest, Beast Wars was where I gave up on the shows. I know a lot of people love that though. Again, I was young, so I don't have any reference of how it compared to anything else. I know it did not look like it aged well. I can watch it now.
The storytelling is still good, but it's hard to get past the CGI at this point.
Yeah. That's how I feel about Reboot. Like I loved Reboot. I want to rewatch it so bad because the story, but man, I don't think I can.
Yeah.
That's tough. They should just remaster that, like not reboot it.
Right.
Not
just
reboot.
Keep the same voice actor. Keep all the same
Make it look nicer.
Update the animation. Yeah. Just redo the animation completely.
Not even that much. Just like a little bit at least. Right. It is hard to watch. And I really wanted to. Just like with all the Sentai shows too. I was like, I'm gonna rewatch Beetleborgs. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Well, I mean, that's how I feel about like the original Transformers cartoon show. Is like there are some great moments in that, but you got to sit through a lot to sell toys to get to the good moments.
Yeah.
Hard.
Well, so you said that the other option we were going to look at is the Transformers 2019 run. Yeah. So how would you say, this is my question to you before we ended or whatever, how would you say that compares to this storytelling wise? Because the universe is rebooted. So is it rebooted as in like, what's up? We're at the beginning of the war. We're in the middle of the war, or like, what does that look like?
So the reason I'm sure there are many reasons they rebooted it, but the approach they took with the reboot was to start before the war and so it is a lot of world building and political intrigue, and it's got some light moments and some very dark moments, and it's very the story that they're telling with that is a story that is kind of a common refrain for Transformers, and it's a refrain for real life of how good intentions can warp without you being aware of how your outcomes are changing from what you had originally intended, and how resentment builds over time in particularly when you have an underclass of people who feel wronged for so long that what starts as popular or as reasonable grievances becomes a revolutionary arm. Basically, it's almost like a recasting of the French Revolution in Transformers terms. Which means that, as opposed to just having one group coming over and, beheading the group that came before, it's how Megatron and his group, some of them are starting with good intentions, some of them not so much. But how did a disagreement become a war?
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a much more serious book, and it was definitely a slow burn. It did not grab me at first.
Yeah.
But again, with the same as this, the character building and the world building that went on in the first 15 issues or so is paying off now with the book, and it's up to issue like 31, 32, somewhere in there. I forget.
Oh, that's wicked doable to catch up on.
But it's definitely worth doing. I will say, so far though, I mean, to me, this IDW Phase 2 that started around 2012 is definitive Transformers.
Okay.
If I had to say, you get to pick one continuity, and that's all that you get to.
Yeah. Well, I love this, so
it's this, no question.
I want to keep to this, and I need to know about the stuff from 10 million years ago. Also, I can't believe the fact that this war is 6 million years is still crazy to me, but I need to know about 10 million years ago. Yes, Elliot, we're still talking about robots in disguise.
Nice.
I'm never going to recover.
Well,
that small robot.
Just keep reading.
Guess I'm going to have to, Dan.
Yeah.
What the hell? I thought I would just read this. I'm like, okay, well, I'm good.
No, you gotta get invested. You gotta.
I gotta know.
You gotta jump in bed with the Transformers. Is really what you gotta do.
Are they all gonna be okay? I gotta know what's gonna happen.
No,
I was hoping Optimus Prime could get a nice vacation.
Well,
he deserves it.
Definition of vacation.
Just like a set of just a mini comic where, like a short run where he's like, "I'm free now. What do I do?"
He's hanging out on the beach.
Yeah.
No, he didn't get to do that.
I already told them I would go to one. So.
Baltimore, October.
I'm in.
There was actually a show in Louisville last weekend, but didn't end up going to it. So.
Well, I guess we can wrap it up here.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
I enjoyed talking about it. I enjoyed rereading it. Folks, hit me up on all the stuff if you want to talk about these books or these characters. I'm always, I love this stuff. So
all I'm hearing is that we should schedule another IDW Transformers show.
We got 6 more trades to read, so
I'm down.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll wrap up appropriately. So, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out today. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you
for hanging out. It's nice. It's you and me.
Yeah.
And I actually know you in real life now. Not weirdly. I assume I know you on the internet, and I come to you in person as if we're friends, and you don't know me. So look at how far we've come.
You know what? That was cool.
I hope you guys like this video. If you're watching this later and you have some comments you'd like to share with us about this book, comment down below. I'm sure Dan and I both check in just to chat more about it because I'd love to. I hope you subscribe if you haven't. If you found us for the first time, wow, neat. Welcome. I'm here every Tuesday, live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Next week, I'll be back with my friend Ren, and we'll be talking about Hawkeye by Matt Fraction.
That's a good book.
Oh, so good.
Another book that you have to actually look at the panels.
Oh my god!
As opposed to just reading it.
I feel like I already love it, so I don't know what I'm going to say about it, but that's fine. Yeah. So join us next week, and have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, folks.
Yeah.
Till all are one.